Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can see in the picture today, let's start the story of What If Issei Was Devil Among Devils Part 1, Chapter 1. Thank you for your patronage. A brown-haired boy bowed as he handed the customer his order. Please come again. That'll be our last walk-in for the day, a middle-aged man called out. Just close up the front, and we'll take care of everything else. Good work today, Haide. Thanks, boss. The boy called back as he walked to the front door and flipped the store sign from open to closed. I'm still amazed that the boss likes you so much, Issei-san, a short brown-haired girl remarked. She took off the hat of her uniform to fan herself after working the fryers all day. He's so grumpy and mean to everyone else. I just try my best, Chiho, the boy, Issei replied with a smile. I'd better get going. It's getting late, and I started my new school tomorrow. Are you? Chiho asked, her voice brimming with thinly veiled curiosity. Which school? The place called Qua Academy, Issei replied, as the two began walking towards the employee lockers. The girl's eyes widened. Qua? She gasped as the two entered the locker room where a screen divided the male section from the female section. Issei entered the left side while Chiho entered the right side. Yep, he answered with a smile, though she couldn't see it. Wow! Chiho's voice exclaimed. I heard the tuition to that place is expensive. If you can afford to go there, why are you working at McDonald's? Under normal circumstances, it would be, Issei conceded. But the school just recently became co-ed, so the Board of Education decided to lower the tuition fees to draw in more students. The complete lie, of course. He'd instead used a hypnosis spell to get himself enrolled. The poor boy didn't even have enough money to enroll in a public high school. Is that so? The girl hummed, as they finished changing and exited the locker room. Maybe I'll transfer there. We could hang out every day. We already hang out at work every day, Chiho, Issei chuckled. The two exited the restaurant, and Issei began unchaining his bike from the bike rack. It's not the same, Chiho exclaimed, puffing her cheeks in a show of frustration. She turned away from him and began muttering to herself. How am I supposed to experience my teenage romantic comedy if we're not in the same school? Did you say something? Issei questioned, glancing over his shoulder at her. Nothing? The girl squeaked, waving her arms frantically. Anyway, I live in the opposite direction, so I'll see you after school tomorrow. Actually, the boss gave me the next few days off, Issei told her. What? Yeah. He said it was to give me time to get used to my new school. Damn that man, Chiho muttered. Did you say something? Nothing. The girl shouted nervously. I'll see you when you get back then, bye. With that, the girl began sprinting in the opposite direction Issei was going. What a strange girl, the brown-haired boy muttered. He shrugged. Oh, well, and with that he mounted his bike and began the long trek home. I'm back, Issei called as he stepped into his apartment. Welcome home, Issei-sama. A male voice called out to him from inside. The brown-haired boy slipped his shoes off and stepped into the place he'd been calling home since arriving in Japan. The apartment was cramped, to say the least. His home consisted of a single room that contained a small kitchen, a kotetsu, and two futons rolled up in the corner. On the wall nearest the front door was a small closet in which they kept their belongings. On the far wall was the door to a tiny, but functional bathroom. Currently standing in the kitchen was a tall, white-haired man that appeared to be in his early 20s. He wore a black sweatshirt and gray trousers. Over his outfit he wore an olive-green apron, which was currently stained with whatever it was he was cooking. What are you making, Ashia? Issei asked as he collapsed at the kotetsu. Smells great. I thought we'd eat something special to celebrate your recent enrollment, Issei-sama, the white-haired man said. He grinned as he brought the plates over. Issei's eyes widened. That's Kaka-katsudon. I know, the man cried. I've been secretly saving for weeks so we could afford the ingredients. I wanted this to feel special. The brown-haired boy placed his hands on Ashia's shoulders. Ashia, he cried, tears running down his face. You truly are my closest friend. The two held each other as they sobbed for their broken wallets. Ashia! Issei-sama! Ashia! Issei-sama! boy, white-haired freak, a feminine voice called out. Hands off, my master! The two young men turned to see nothing. Down here! They looked down to see a small puppet glaring at them. The puppet had lime green hair with matching eyes and had two metallic protrusions where her ears should have been. Dressed like a tiny maid, she would have looked cute if it wasn't for the psychotic gleam in her eyes. That wretched doll. Issei scowled. What the fuck did you call me? Tachizero, Issei sighed. Down, girl. Yes, master. The doll's tones suddenly became sweet and innocent, as though she hadn't been 2 seconds away from slitting Issei's throat. I don't understand why you insist on keeping that doll, Issei-sama. Issei scowled at the puppet. She stuck her tongue out at him in response. She's not that bad, Issei. The brown-haired boy defended his familiar as he began eating. She was a gift, remember? Ah, yes, the man muttered as he, too, began to eat. From that vampire wench, correct? The one that made it her mission in life to bed you? Issei coughed. Yes, her, he said with a quick nod. I can see why she was so eager to get rid of it, Asher remarked dryly. Fuck you too, Shikizero said offhandedly. So why did she give you her familiar? The white-haired man asked curiously. My former master believed that I would drive Issei insane. He would then come crawling back to her in tears, pleading to take me back, Shakazaro explained cheerfully. She would then give him an ultimatum, become her life, made her suffer for the rest of eternity. Both men were stunned into silence. But my new master is too awesome to fall for such a petty scheme. The puppet cried, pumping her fist enthusiastically. Hey master, can I feed you? Issei blinked at the sudden change in subject. Sure, Zero-chan, the puppet squealed happily. She reached up, grabbing hold of one of her metallic ears and pulled, unsheathing a 6-inch knife. It never fails to disturb me, Issei muttered, staring at the blade as the puppet stabbed some food and fed it to her master. You realize those same knives have most likely taken the lives of dozens, if not hundreds, of people? Come on, Issei rolled his eyes. Yeah, the puppet agreed. It was way more than that. The two men paused. Whatever, Issei-sama. Our hands aren't exactly clean either, Alciel. Of course, Mayu-sama. So this is Core Academy, Issei muttered as he stood at the front gates in his new uniform. He could see why tuition was so expensive. His wallet felt lighter just looking at the elegant buildings and immaculate school grounds. A series of muffled noises coming from inside his bag drew the attention of several of his fellow students. He waved at them sheepishly before ducking behind a nearby tree. Kneeling down, he opened his bag and quickly silenced the offender with a flick to the forehead. Bow! Shakazaro grunted, rubbing at the afflicted spot. Zero-chan, we agreed that if you want to come, you need to be quiet. But why do you have to stuff me in that cramped-ass bag of yours? What else would you have me do? Issei sighed. I can't exactly carry you around without drawing some rather unwanted attention to myself. Why not? The doll asked with a pout. Don't worry, master. I'll slice up anyone that gives you trouble. Do you remember why we came to Japan in the first place? He asked, his voice deadpan. Shakazaro averted her eyes. Zero-chan. It was that bitch's fault. You provoked her into attacking us? Issei snapped. She ended up destroying the city. We had to flee the country. It's not my fault, she's a complete klutz. The puppet snapped in return. I swear she can't even tie her own shoes without help. Ugh, now I've got a massive headache, the brown-haired boy sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Alright, Zero-chan. If I let you out, you have to stay completely still around other people. Okay, got it, master. Shakazaro saluted him before leaping on top of his head. Shotgun. I don't even have the strength to argue with you anymore, Issei muttered as he began making his way to his new classroom. There was no one in the halls, so he could only assume that he was late. Finding his class after several minutes of searching, he knocked on the door before sliding it open. As the class's eyes turned towards him. You must be the new student, the teacher exclaimed. Please come in and introduce yourself. Doing as instructed, he stepped into the classroom. Immediately, whispers began flying throughout the room. The new student, he's kinda cute. What's with the doll? Issei walked to the chalkboard and wrote his name twice, once in kanji and again in hiragana. He turned towards the class and smiled his best smile, nearly causing several girls to swoon. "Hello, everyone, my name is Issei," the brown-haired boy introduced himself. "I've only recently returned to Japan after living overseas for most of my life. I hope we can be friends." He finished with a polite bow. "Does anyone have any questions for Ida-kun?" the teacher asked. Several hands went up. Issei pointed at a glasses-wearing girl. "Yes." The brunette girl stood adjusting her glasses. "Kurioka," she introduced herself, staring at the puppet lying prone atop his head. "What's with the doll, Haidu-kun?" "It was given to me by a dear friend of mine," Issei answered. Shakazaro pulled on his hair for calling her an ID, but he ignored her. "I carry it with me so I will never forget that person." The puppet on his head let out a scoff, which was thankfully drowned out by the chorus of awe by the girls of the class. Another girl stood, a desperate look on her face. "Was this person a girlfriend?" Issei coughed. "No, she wasn't. She wanted to be much more," Shakazaro whispered snugly. Thankfully, her remark was drowned out by sighs of relief from several females. Issei's eye twitched. He would have to discipline her later. Though with how much she seemed to enjoy his punishments, he didn't see much point in it. The boy stood this time. "Name's Matsuda. My question is this: why did you come here? Popular guys should just die." Fortunately, Issei didn't have to answer, as Matsuda was swiftly mauled by half of the females in the room. After the teacher managed to restore order, he assigned Issei a seat by the window and began class. As Issei sat down, he closed his eyes. "I can sense quite a few devils in this school." He knew that the school consisted of 3 stories. First years on floor 1, second years on floor 2, and third years on floor 3. He was currently in room 2A. He could sense a devil next door in room 2B and 5 more in 2C. 6 devils, he muttered to himself as he stared out the window. The teacher placed him in the back row on the left side of the room, right next to the window. For some reason, this felt cliché to him. 6 devils on this floor alone, but they all seem low class in terms of power. "Well, Haidu-kun," the teacher said, returning Issei from his musing. "Since you seem so talkative, why don't you tell me the answer?" 327.65, the brown-haired boy said after glancing at the problem in question. "That's correct," the teacher muttered as the class looked at him in astonishment. "Very good, Haidu-kun." Issei spent the rest of class gazing out the window, answering whatever questions the teacher threw at him. Needless to say, by the end of the day, he had become the talk of the school. And as he walked off the school grounds towards home, he was well aware that someone was watching him. Some distance away, 2 beautiful young women were unaware they had already been detected. One of them, a stunning Caucasian girl with green eyes and crimson red hair, watched the new student with rapt attention. "So, that's the famous Haidu Issei-kun. He's only been here for a day, but he's already made quite a name for himself," the other, a black-haired girl, said with a serene smile. "The mysterious boy from overseas with genius intellect and a handsome appearance. Kiba-kun's rival for the title of school prince. How interesting," the red-haired girl licked her lips and grinned. "I'll be keeping a close eye on you, Haidu Issei-kun." Chapter 2, I'm Back, Issei called out as he and Shachizaro stepped into their apartment. "Welcome home, Issei-sama," Ashaya called out in return. The brown-haired boy slid his shoes off and entered the sole room of their apartment. "Did anything of interest happen today?" "There seems to be quite a few devils attending the school," Issei replied as Shakazaro hopped off his head and onto the katetsu. "Most of them seem low class in terms of power," the puppet continued for him. "Though 2 of them seemed mid-class. We believe they are pure-blooded devils, with the others being their servants." "Ah, the evil peace system, as I recall," Oshiya commented as he took his own seat at the katetsu. He reached into his back pocket, revealing an envelope. "Issei-sama, we've received a missive from the others." Issei took the proffered message and read for several moments before nodding. "The others will be arriving in short order. Where'd they all go anyway?" the green-haired puppet asked curiously. "Well, when we had to flee the country," Issei began, prompting the puppet to cock her head in faux innocence. "We were forced to scatter." Really? Chikazura muttered, rubbing her tiny chin. I don't remember any of that. I believe you were too busy trying to kill everything around you to notice, the brown-haired boy deadpanned. Ah, yes, the doll nodded, a nostalgic smile on her face. That I remember, Issei let out a sigh. Well, anyway, I'm home, a voice called out, causing all three to freeze. As one, they turned to see Issei standing at the doorway with a stunned expression on his face. His arms were laden with groceries from the 100-yen store. Issei? Issei questioned in surprise. He turned back to the white-haired man sitting across from him, his eyes narrowed. Tomomo. Issei let out a playful smirk before being enveloped in a cloud of smoke. Poof! When the smoke cleared, Issei had disappeared. In his place sat a beautiful girl with light reddish-pink hair and mischievous amber eyes. Her hair was tied into long pigtails using a large blue ribbon. She wore a dark blue and black kimono that left her shoulders completely exposed and gave him an ample view of her sizable bust. Her figure was slim and attractive, further emphasized by the elegant black and gold obi tied around her waist, and though the outfit left her shoulders exposed, the arms of her kimono remained in imitation of arm warmers. The kimono itself cut off at her upper thigh, giving him a good look at the milky skin of her legs before it gave way to dark purple stockings. And though she currently wore no shoes, Issei knew she kept a pair of elegant black Jetta sandals. However, her most exotic features were by far the canine-esque ears jutting from the top of her head. That, as well as the long bushy tail that was currently swaying behind her in amusement. Guilty as charged, master, Tamamo giggled. Oh great, Shakazaru groaned. The fox girl. The only sign she heard the puppet was the twitching of her ears. Instead, the fox girl latched onto Issei's arm, pressing her breasts against him provocatively. Oh, I missed you so much, master. Issei smiled wally. I missed you too, he replied before carefully removing himself from her grip. In the background, Issei merely sighed before getting started on supper. Tamama, I'm surprised you found us so quickly. And where is Suzuki? I thought she was with you when we split up. Oh, her? The fox girl asked offhandedly. I ditched her after we escaped. Be what? Issei demanded as he set fresh cups of tea down before them. The mama waved him off. Ah, she'll be fine, she said. She's a tough one. Besides, you pamper the others too much, master. You should pamper me. INSTAT. She took a sip of her tea and frowned. What's with this horrible tea? Issei scowled at her. It's all we can afford right now, especially after our party last night. Moo! The fox girl whined. You had a party without me? Wouldn't call it much of the party, Chachizero remarked. These two idiots were making a big deal about Katsuden. Zero-chan. The puppet looked at her master, her expression deadpan. You may be my master, but you're still an idiot, she said bluntly. Honestly, 327. So what? We were in English class. The puppet snapped. Issei averted his eyes. Well, I wanted them to accept me without asking too many questions and drawing unwanted attention to myself, he said. So I may have cast a tiny hypnosis charm on them. Well, that backfired spectacularly, Chachizero deadpanned. As the two continued to argue, Tamamo stood and poured her on drunk tea down the sink. Boy! Ashia growled. Don't waste our resources. The fox girl ignored him in favor of looking around the apartment with a frown on her face. Why are we living in such a tiny apartment? Oh no, Chikazura muttered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Our humble abode does not live up to the standards of the great Tamamo no Mae. Whatever shall we do? But of course. The legendary Kitsune sniffed. I was the courtesan of an emperor, you know? Cough, glorified, whore cough. Zero-chan. Sorry, this is only a temporary base, the white-haired man spoke up, sensing the impending explosion. Until we can gather our resources, however, we're stuck here. In other words, until Suzuki gets here, we're screwed. Tomomo asked dryly. She sent a dangerous glare at Shikizero as she said this. The puppet stuck her tongue out in response. Well, if somebody hadn't ditched her, Issei muttered, prompting the fox girl to cock her head innocently. He rose from his seat and made his way over to one of the kitchen drawers. He withdrew a large envelope from the drawer before returning to the kotetsu and handing it to the fox girl. These are your identification papers. We've enrolled you as a second-year student at Ko Academy. Tamamo took a look at her papers and frowned. Mino Tamamo? She huffed. Very creative. Lei Moshiya. So, what's our source of income for the time being? Well, I'm working part-time at McDonald's. Aishiya is working as a telephone operator at some small-time company. Issei paused, raising an eyebrow at the now giggling fox girl. What's so funny? I am sorry. Tamamo placed a hand over her mouth in an attempt to stifle the sound of her laughter. I am just trying to picture you asking me, would you like fries with that? The brown-haired boy quickly grew irritated. You just wait. He snapped, I know for a fact that I'll be getting a promotion soon. That shall be my first step in climbing the corporate ladder and ruling this country. Master, you're doing it again, Shachizaro interrupted his maniacal laughter. As he coughed. Thank you, Zero-chan. The puppet nodded. So, Tamamo said, as though her master hadn't gone into a hysterical fit just a few moments ago. I placed a few seals around town before coming here. Already, I've detected supernatural movement. As he nodded. As I told you, we've already discerned that there are 2 pure-blooded devils living in this town, both of which have several peerage members. Devils, the fox Yakai muttered, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. My seals informed me that there are several fallen angels moving throughout the city as well. The word around town is that the church on top of the hill was abandoned until recently, Issei-sama, as she is supplied. Apparently, a strange priest moved in, and several other characters have been seen coming and going. The fallen are likely based there. Any angel presence? None so far, Master, Issei nodded. All right then, we'll continue to lay low and observe them, he said. Hopefully, they remain neutral. I'd prefer to avoid having to deal with Azazel's nonsense. Just thinking of having to listen to him prattle on about sacred ears is giving me a headache. And what of the devils, Issei-sama? Ashiya asked. Should we contact them? I'd prefer not to, but I believe they've already noticed me, Issei admitted. No kidding, those 2 girls were practically drooling over you, Shachizaro interjected snidely. Girls? Tamamo smirked. Ho ho, are you seducing more women, master? Aren't we, your beautiful and ever so willing servants, enough to sate your lust? They were Rias Gremory and Himejima Akino, Issei said, ignoring the fox girl, much to her chagrin. Apparently, they are quite popular among the student body. Bremery? Ashiya asked in surprise. Of the 72 pillars? The very same, the brown-haired boy nodded. After some digging, I've discovered that the president of the school goes by the name Sona Chatori. I believe that is a pseudonym for her true name, Sona Citri. Those 2 are the heiresses of their respective families, Tamamo noted, and both are sisters of the current leaders of New Hell. Issei nodded once more. Indeed, he intoned as Aishiya placed their dinner before them. I did akamasu. What the hell is this? The fox frowned, staring at the meal before them. Cucumbers dipped in honey. The brown-haired boy said enthusiastically, if you close your eyes and pinch your nose, it really does taste like watermelon. The legendary Kitsune closed her eyes and wept. Suzuki, she wailed. I'm sorry for ditching you. Please get here soon. Oh, I'm so hungry, Tamamo groaned as the 2 walked through the gates of Ko Academy the next day. She had transformed into her fully human form before leaving the apartment. This left herself with a normal pair of ears and rendered her tail less. Issei had to admit, she pulled off the uniform spectacularly with her slim figure, long legs and a sizable bust. Needless to say, she was drawing quite a bit of attention. Who's that beauty? Why is she walking with Hadouken? Don't tell me they're a couple. No. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, Issei muttered. The mama giggled. What's the matter, master? She asked teasingly, feeling shy. We're trying to avoid drawing too much attention to ourselves. Well, you already screwed yourself over on that part yesterday, Chakazaro whispered. She was once again perched atop his head. Face it, you're always going to draw attention to yourself no matter where you go. It's Murphy's Law. They say merely sight as they reach their class. He took his seat as the Kitsune spoke with the teacher. The brunette boy hoped that she could at least introduce herself in a normal fashion. "Hello, everyone," she exclaimed with a wink. "I'm Ino Tamamo and I'm Issei-kun's mistress." Of course not, Issei thought as chaos ensued. Characters will most likely be fleshed out later on when they actually meet Riaz and the others. For those of you who just can't wait, here's a quick character bio. Characters introduced so far: Haida Issei Mayu, high school DxD, with the appearance of a young teenager. One would never suspect that Haida Issei is one of the most powerful beings in existence. One of the original 7 Mayu. Which one? The most powerful of them all, naturally. Satan, the Lord of Wrath, the King of Demons, the Devil himself. After the deaths of God, Issei, drained of much of his power, fled into the human world with only a Shia at his side. Knowing that his enemies, both external and internal, would take advantage of his weakened state to kill him, he remained hidden among the humans. But the world moved on without God and without him. Believing their leader to be dead, talented young devils eventually rose up to lead their people. The world found relative peace without him, and so he continued to isolate himself from his people even as he regained his power. But as Shakazaru said, Murphy's Law is a bitch, and no matter where he went, trouble was sure to follow. Shirashia Alciel, Hadaraka Mausama, the devil is a part-timer. Seemingly a young man in his early 20s with grayish-white hair and gold eyes. Ashiel is Osai's most loyal and powerful servant, a constant companion. Ashiel and Ashiel have been together for as long as they can remember. An extremely talented practitioner of magic, Ashia has used his magical prowess to serve and protect his master from millennia upon millennia. He's also a damn good cook when given proper ingredients. I.e., not €100 store groceries, servant, friend, comrade, world's greatest housewife. Issei is all of these and more. Shakazaru, Najima. Magister Nijimagi, an enchanted doll created by the beautiful and powerful Dark Mistress, Evangeline Athanasia Catherine, Kitty, McDowell. A cute child's plaything, right? Wrong. Have you ever heard of Chucky? Well, he's got nothing on Shakazaru. As psychotic as they come, her blades have been bathed in the blood of countless people, human or otherwise. Even to his say by Evangeline in a failed attempt at courtship, Shakazaru is nevertheless completely devoted to her new master, and should anybody attempt to move in on him, well, me no Tomomo no mi, Fate Extra, the legendary Kitsune herself. Long ago, she was known as the most beautiful and intelligent woman in Japan. There was seemingly nothing she did not know. Not surprising from a being that was created from a part of the goddess Amaterasu herself. Her beauty and knowledge earned the attention of the emperor, who made her a part of his court. However, the emperor soon grew ill. A priest began investigating the cause of the illness and, after a powerful ritual, discovered Tamamo's true identity as a nine-tailed fox. She was chased from the court and attacked by the emperor's army. She defeated this force, but the battle took its toll on her. She was defeated by a second force and sealed away in the killing stone, which would poison any who attempted to free her. Years later, the stone was stumbled across by the man who would eventually call himself Issei, and the demon king set her free. Grateful, the beautiful fox swore to follow and serve him to the best of her abilities. And so the demon king utilized his formidable power to reincarnate her into a devil. Even now, centuries later, Issei continues to utilize her abilities to disguise herself from nearly all forms of sensory, casts powerful illusions and her formidable yujutsu. Although skilled in senjutsu and proficient in the martial arts, Tamamo is more of a caster type. Chapter 3. Issei let out a sigh as the school bell rung, signaling the start of lunch break. The brunette glanced up to see Tamamo being ushered out by a group of girls. He had tasked her this morning with gathering information on the devils of the school and would most likely use those girls to do so. Either that or establish her position as queen and supreme overlord of the school or, as Shakazaru described, attention whoring. He could never quite tell with her. Issei saw other students starting to approach him. They most likely wanted to know his relationship with Tamamo, so he quickly ducked out. He really didn't want to deal with them right now. He swiftly maneuvered his way through the hallways, trying to stay out of sight as much as possible. Eventually, he came across a meadow-like area near an older school building, away from the curious stares of his classmates. Heaving a small sigh of relief, he sat down under a large tree and opened the feast prepared by his loyal housekeeper, Issei. Dion rice? Issei cheered as he spotted his pathetically meager meal. Issei, you've outdone yourself once again, but grief Shachizaro muttered from her place on his shoulder. As he devoured his meal, he noticed a commotion nearby. A glance over his shoulder revealed that the girls' kendo club was chasing down two boys, shini in hand and violence in their eyes. He recognized the boys as Matsuda and Motohama from his class. Even after only 2 days in school, he'd already heard of their reputation as hardcore perverts. Now, Issei himself was appreciative of the female body. Many of his own servants and acquaintances were quite beautiful in their own right. But those two boys, they could give Asmodeus a run for his money. Feeling mischievous, he suddenly pointed at them with his right index finger. Both boys suddenly felt the ground shift beneath them, causing them both to land flat on their faces. Leaning back, the brunette boy watched with re-amusement as the kendo club pounced on the two unfortunate perverts. Master? Issei sighed. I know, Zero-chan. He looked up at the crimson-haired girl spying on him from the old school building and smiled wally. He knows magic, Rias exclaimed in surprise. He does? Okino questioned. Strange, I can't sense anything out of the ordinary with him. Neither can I, the red-haired girl muttered as she moved away from the window. He must be concealing himself. And what do you intend to do with him? I'm still interested, she replied with a smirk. More so now, in fact. I'll have Kaneko tail him after school, and if he proves to be dangerous, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it, the Redid said off-handedly. I'm back, a male voice called out. They turned to see a handsome blonde-haired boy entering, bowing as he did. Udo, Rias acknowledged. Welcome back. Era Kibakuen, was there something you needed? The black-haired girl asked. You're usually with your human friends during lunch breaks. As a matter of fact, there is, Yuto nodded. I wish to discuss the fallen angels that have moved in recently. Rias frowned. Ah, yes, there's that too, she muttered. I wonder. But you? I've noticed that the fallen angels have been watching a certain establishment, Rias explained, the McDonald's in the shopping district. Unless I'm mistaken, I've seen Haida Issei-kun working there. Do you think the fallen angels are after him, but you? Yuto questioned. It's a possibility, the Redid nodded. Tell me, what do you two know of him so far? Only that he seems to be quite popular, Yuto admitted. After checking the school registry with permission from Sona Kaicho, of course, I've discovered that he's been attending school overseas, Akino replied. After his parents passed away, he returned to Japan to live with a friend of the family, one is Shiro. And then there's the matter of that strange girl that transferred in this morning. Udo frowned. Strange girl? He repeated. A new student transferred into Class 2A, Rias rolled her eyes. She declared herself his mistress. Udo winced. Well, perhaps that is strange, he admitted. But for all we know, she could be telling the truth. Rias sighed. Perhaps, she allowed. For now, we'll keep an eye on both of them. And the fallen angels, but you? I want to find out what they're after, the reticulier. I'd rather avoid a conflict, however. So, for the time being, we'll continue to observe them. Udo nodded just as the bell rang, signaling the end of their lunch break. As you wish, Bachu. He turned towards the door. I'll be returning to class now. Oh, Udo, Rias called. If you see Kaneko, be sure to remind her to come see me after school. Yes, but you with that, the blonde made his exit. Only when the door fully closed behind him did he allow a fox-like grin to stretch across his face. You're not human, a white-haired girl accused as she stood in his path. Issei sighed. Tomomo had warned him that someone would be following him after school, but he hadn't been expecting this. And what makes you say that, Tuja-san? Thankfully, he had stuffed Chachasaro into his bag the moment he saw her approaching. You're hiding your aura using an unknown method, the girl replied warily, but I can still sense your kai, which isn't human. In fact, you feel incredibly similar to a devil. Senjutsu? Issei asked in surprise. The girl, if possible, stiffened even more. I insist you come see Bachu, Kaneko said lowly. She looked ready to fight if he resisted. Issei sighed once more. Very well, lead the way. He conceded. Honestly, a few days and I've been discovered already. I'm losing my touch. When the girl began leading him away, he opened his bag. Shakazaru was glaring at him venomously. Sorry, Zero-chan, he mouthed the words. I'm going to be delayed. Go and tell Ashaya. Don't worry. I can handle this. She looked ready to protest, but he silenced her with a glare. With great reluctance, she slipped out of his bag and into a nearby bush. Issei continued to follow the petite girl as she led him to the old school building. He had attempted to converse with the small girl, but she only responded with small terse statements. As they entered the building, he noticed that one of the doors had been sealed shut. A sign that read "Do not enter" hung from the doorknob. They eventually came to a stop in front of a different door on the second floor, and Kaneko announced their presence. But I've brought him, she called as she opened the door for him. Inside, 3 people turned to them in surprise. He recognized them as Rias Gremory, Himejima Akino, and Kabuto. So, this is her peerage. Hi, Dosen? Rias questioned. Kaneko, why did you bring him here? He's not human, but the white-haired girl explained. The 2 females looked surprised, but Kiba sported a strange expression. Is that so? The crimson-haired girl asked. And just what is he? He's a devil, but the Reed's eyes narrowed. Is that so? She asked quietly. She seemed disappointed. Well, Hada-san, may I ask what is your purpose here at our prestigious academy? And why did you not inform me or Saunasatri before entering the city? To be honest. He shrugged as Akeno showed him to one of the couches. I wasn't even aware there were other devils in this city until just yesterday. I was more concerned with getting a promotion at McDonald's. Is that so? Ria's sweat dropped. And why exactly did you come here? No particular reason, he replied. My companions and I have been traveling the world for a while. Some of them originated from Japan, so I felt we should pay a visit. I see, she said. And I presume these companions are in fact your servants? He hesitated slightly before nodding. Not that any of them noticed his hesitation, of course. But Rias did appear thoughtful. I've never heard the name Haida before, though. I'm not affiliated with a clan, he explained. Nor have any of my deeds merited any special attention. You're an extra devil then, she nodded. And I assume the girl that transferred and declared herself your mistress this morning is one of your servants? Issei chuckled in embarrassment as the crimson-haired girl looked at him with amusement in her eyes. Sorry about that, he saw Kiba twitch in his peripheral vision. Rias looked at her servants, who simply shrugged in return. He seemed to be telling the truth. Very well then. So long as you don't intend to cause any trouble, I see no reason for us to come into conflict. She gave him a smile, and in that moment, Issei realized why she was considered the most beautiful girl in the school. The crimson-haired beauty stood from her desk and walked around, offering her hand. Allow me to officially welcome you to Kwa Academy, Hada-san. Issei is fine. The brown-haired boy nodded as he shook her proffered hand. Very well, Issei-kun, she nodded. Whatever she was about to say was interrupted as a voice called out. But I'm back. The room's occupants turned to see Kiba Yuta walking through the door. Why, Yuta Rios exclaimed in shock as she looked between the 2 Kibas. But Issei sighed loudly as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. I'm so sorry about this, he said, glaring at the Kiba on the couch. Kiba allowed a smirk to cross his face before he was enveloped in a cloud of smoke. Poof. Moo, people always have the worst timing. Tamamo complained. Wah-poo. Once again, I'm sorry, Issei apologized. This is Tamamo, my servant. That's not possible. Kaneko suddenly snapped. She looked the most shocked out of everyone in the room. I couldn't sense her at all. She actually looked a bit frightened. Yes, that's one of her many talents, Issei nodded. She can completely disguise herself from almost all forms of sensory. Ria's eyes were narrowed in thought. One would have to be very skilled in senjutsu to hide themselves from another user, she muttered. Powerful senjutsu shape-shifting Tamamo. She looked up at them in shock. as she can't be. You know your history well, Harem. The girl grinned as 9 majestic foxtails sprouted from her lower back. Yes, my true name is Tamamo no Mae. Rias and her servants looked awed. To think you have such a legendary person as your servant, the redhead muttered as she looked at Issei in a new light. You must be very powerful. Who exactly are you? Issei shrugged. I was just in the right place at the right time. I see, she accepted his answer. For now, at least. How many of your servants are currently in the city? Currently, only 2, Issei replied. Tamamo is the only one here at school with me, as my other servant's chosen appearance is a little too old for high school. I suspect that several of my other servants will be arriving sometime within the next few weeks. I see, Rias nodded as she took a seat on the couch opposite Issei. Well, Issei-san, I'd like to extend an invitation for you to join the Occult Research Club. Oh yes, the club is just a front, she explained. I won't have any real power over you. We just use it as an excuse to get out of class if the need arises. I see. Plus, I feel that cooperation between our groups would be beneficial, would it not? She continued. Being in the same club will provide an easy method of communication, and all right, you've convinced me, Issei chuckled. Very well, Gremory-san. We'll join your club. Rias beamed. Well, I suppose introductions are in order. She stood from her seat. I am Rias Gremory, of the Gremory House, and I am king of this group. The crimson-haired girl allowed her aura to extend and wash over them, causing Issei to blink in surprise. She's already remarkably strong for her age, he thought, though considering who her brother is, I'm not all that surprised. Rias waved her hand towards the pony-tailed girl who was preparing tea. This is Himejima Ikano. She is my kind. The black-haired girl placed his tea on the table and bowed to him. I'm in your care, Issei-kun, she said with a serene smile. She truly looked like the definition of Yamato Nadeshiko, the perfect Japanese woman. This is Kiba Yuro, my kinai GHT. Kiba, who had looked confused for the majority of his time there, nodded to him with a smile akin to that of the prince. Nice to meet you, Issei-kun. And this is Taja Kaneko, my ROOK. The stoic white-haired girl looked uncharacteristically nervous. She kept glancing at Tamamo out of the corner of her eye, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. Nice to meet you, she nodded at him quietly. Issei took that as his cue to stand and introduce himself. I am Heidi Issei, traveler. He smiled mischievously and released a fraction of his own aura. This aura actually caused the crimson-haired princess to stagger backwards in shock. The rest of her peerage also appeared floored. Had they been standing, they likely would have been brought to their knees. Hey, that's incredible, Rias muttered as she composed herself. Meanwhile, her peerage continued to stare at him in mute shock. That was your true strength. Sorry about that, Issei chuckled. They simply smiled at him weakly. And this is me no Tamamai, Bishop. I'm pleased to make your acquaintance, the fox girl said. She then performed an elegant bow that gave Aikino a run for her money and the title of Yamato Nadeshiko. It's an honor to meet you as well, Tamamo-san. Rias practically had stars in her eyes, her earlier shock from Issei's aura forgotten. Don't tell me she's one of those people obsessed about anything Japanese-related. Bikano coughed delicately, causing Rias to snap out of her Japan-induced daze. All right, sorry, she said sheepishly. Anyway, I welcome you to our humble club, Issei-kun. Thank you, Grimari-senpai. Rias? Issei smiled. Very well, Rias-senpai. Well, today has certainly been productive, the red-haired girl smiled. I'll have to introduce you to Sona soon. You mentioned you have another servant, but he's too old for high school. All of us are too old for high school, Issei thought wryly. Indeed. I'll talk to Sona tonight about getting him a teaching position at the school, she offered. I'd imagine you'd like your servants close at hand. That would be very helpful. Thank you, Issei bowed to her. I suppose I'll see you tomorrow then, senpai. Until tomorrow, Issei-kun, Rias called as he and Tamamo took their leave. As the door closed behind them, Okino turned towards their leader. What do you think of this development, Bachu? She asked curiously. I'm a little disappointed that I can't make him a part of my peerage, she replied. However, his isn't exactly an unpleasant development. He's powerful. He has to be to have the Tamamo no Mei in his peerage. With the sudden increase of fallen angel activity, it'll be nice to have him on our side. The fallen were watching his workplace, weren't they? Kiba piped in. Do you think they know he's a devil? I doubt it, Rias shook her head. He's good at hiding his power. We only found out he's a devil because of Kaneko. No, they must be after something else. But what? Perhaps Issei-kun knows something about it. Akino suggested. I hope so. She smiled slightly. All right, you seem happy, but you? Rias flushed slightly. Well, I find him interesting, she said quickly. And you can't deny you feel the same way, Okino. If you foo-foo, she placed a hand to her cheek as they became rosy. I admit, when he unleashed his aura, I felt hot all over. It was so dominating. I think I'm jealous of Tamamo Dano. If she's his bishop, I shudder to think who his quen is, Rias muttered. I wouldn't be surprised if his entire peerage consisted of monsters, Kiba added his 2 cents. He smiled. I look forward to meeting them. As do I, Rias nodded. She looked towards her ROK, who had been quieter than usual. Kaneko, are you okay? The white-haired girl jumped slightly at being called out. I'm fine, but it's Tamamo-san, isn't it? Kaneko nodded hesitantly. You fear her senjutsu? Another hesitant nod and Ria sighed. Dara, perhaps she can help you, Akino said comfortingly. She's a legendary spirit with lots of experience. I'm certain she can teach you if you ask her nicely. There's no need to rush, Kaneko, Rias added sympathetically. Take as much time as you need. Kaneko merely nodded as she gazed at the door in which Issei and Tamamo had left from. We're home. Issei called out as he and Tamamo stepped through the threshold. The sound of frantic footfalls was his only warning before he was suddenly pulled inside. Issei-sama? Ashia shouted hysterically. Are you okay? Did they touch you in inappropriate places? Is your purity intact? I'm not exactly a virgin, Ashia, Issei growled before realizing just what his servant was saying. Wait, what did Shakazaru tell you? She said you'd been accosted by sexual deviants. The white-haired man shrieked, still in hysterics. She said that they'd caught you while your guard was down, and that the lewd no-good fox was just egging them on. She said that you ordered her to save herself with the very last of your strength. He let out a growl. I was going to go save you, but I couldn't find my demon general cape. Wait, you mean the reason you didn't save me was because you couldn't find your cape, Issei or master? I think you're missing the point, Tomoko began. I'm sorry, Issei-sama, Ashia cried, groveling before him, tears running down his face. Damn it, Ashia. You're supposed to be my right hand. I'm sorry, master. How am I supposed to rely on you? I'm sorry, master. And another thing. Master. What? You know what? Never mind, the poor girl really did look exhausted. I'm tired. Wake me up when dinner's ready. From her perch on the kitchen counter, Shikizuru surveyed her handiwork with a wicked smirk. Just another day in the life. Chapter 4. Please go out with me. A black-haired girl cried out, bowing low as she awaited his reply. The girl in question was wearing a different uniform from his own. It consisted of a red jacket with a letter P embroidered upon her breast pocket, a white undershirt with a red bow and a green skirt. Her dainty hands cradled her handbag as her violet eyes looked up at him nervously. Well, this is unexpected to say, thought, resisting the urge to heave a world-weary sigh. The girl was a fallen angel, he could tell that much. But what did she want from him? I'm sorry, but who are you? The girl seemed to flush in embarrassment. Sorry, she stuttered. My name is Amano-uma. It's just I've watched you walking by a few times already. But I've only just managed to gather the courage to ask you out. You're not seeing anyone, are you? Well, no, he said cautiously. Well, her story technically checks out. He had noticed her watching him walk home from school and at work. However, he was certain that he'd kept his aura hidden at all times, the time with Rias and her peerage a few days ago being the sole exception. But he'd made sure to cover his tracks on that occasion as well. He was somewhat glad that Shakazaru was still somewhat upset with him and was currently at home, most likely tormenting Ashia. That's great. The girl's face lit up. So will you? Well, let's take a look at the pros and cons, he mused. Pros. He would be spending time with an attractive, gorgeous girl. He'd always had a thing for angel girls, fallen or otherwise. In fact, his past relationship with a certain archangel could be considered the stuff of legend. He could also use this to discover the fallen angel's motives here in the city, and why they were watching him in particular. There were also the girl's own feelings to consider. It was hardly uncommon for a fallen angel to become infatuated with a human. In fact, having explicit relations with humans was the most common reason that angels fell. Neither was it unheard of, though still rare, for a fallen angel and a devil to be intimate. In fact, Azazel had informed him some time ago that Shamelessly married a devil woman. The eccentric governor-general had expressed his hope that it would lead to further peace between the factions. But he was digressing. Hans. He knew for a fact that several females would give him sheer hell for getting the girlfriend. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, after all, and knowing a certain fox's skills with maleficium, he held no doubt that she would exact terrible vengeance on him. There was also a high likelihood that this was all just a ploy of some kind, one that would no doubt end unpleasantly for both of them. As he watched her fidget, Issei realized that he'd been staring at her with a severe expression for several minutes now. He was about to answer when he suddenly remembered something Azazel had brought up during their last meeting. The new organization has been moving in the shadows, the governor informed him solemnly, as they shared a bottle of brandy. I fear they plan to disrupt the tentative ceasefire that we've established. They call themselves the Cows Brigade. And that's not the worst of it. I fear that I may have a traitor among my own organization. What makes you say that? Issei questioned, pouring himself another glass. Groups of fallen angels have begun behaving erratically, the former angel sighed. You know of my interest in sacred gears, no? Well, I asked my fellow Grigori to help by monitoring sacred gear users, but these users are starting to disappear. You mean they're killing them? Some of them have turned up dead, yes, Azazel admitted, taking another swig of his drink. The fallen angels responsible claimed that it was in self-defense, but you can understand my doubts. Most of the sacred gear users just up and vanish. That is suspicious, Issei murmured before downing his drink and standing. I'll contact you if I discover anything. Shaking himself out of his little reverie, the brown-haired boy smiled slightly. Sure, I'd love to, he said finally. I can only hope Tamama will understand my reasoning. The girl, Yuma, he reminded himself, smiled brightly. Really? She let out a sigh of relief. That's great. Here's my number, call me. After writing her contact information on a slip of paper, she handed it to him with a beaming smile. I hope I'll see you soon, Issei-kun. With a quick bow she ran off in the opposite direction he was headed. Issei simply watched her disappear around the corner. Indeed you, Amazon? Well, a smug voice called from behind him, making his eyes widen. He recognized that voice. Seducing schoolgirls now? I thought you were better than that, master. Spinning around, he spotted a blonde-haired girl leaning against a nearby lamppost. The girl wore her hair in a messy ponytail with locks of hair framing either side of her face. She was short, with him being a full head taller than her. She wore a white tube top with blue trim that left the majority of her midriff exposed, giving him a good look at her perfectly toned stomach. Slung casually over her shoulder was a bright red leather jacket. The only thing protecting her lower body from exposure were a tiny pair of Daisy Dukes. She accessorized with a thick black belt with silver studding. Completing the ensemble was a pair of black combat boots studded with silver skulls. But her most striking feature, in his opinion, were her bright forest green eyes. They glared at him with a fierce intensity rarely seen in today's youth. She was hardly a simple schoolgirl, Mordred, Issei answered her. You should have been able to tell what she is. She wasn't even attempting to disguise it. The blonde rolled her eyes. I was teasing, she grumbled. Lighten up, will you? When did you arrive? Issei asked as he approached her. I arrived in Japan a few days ago, she replied offhandedly. I decided to take the scenic route, though. Hope you don't mind. There's not exactly anything I can do about it at this point, the brunette quipped. His ears perked up, however, when he heard the sound of motorcycles approaching them. Within moments, the two were surrounded by what appeared to be a gang of delinquent bikers. Issei tensed as he gazed at them warily. There had to be at least a dozen of them, and each of the gangsters was glaring at him menacingly. "What's going on here?" Issei muttered. Then, to his utter shock, one of them spoke up. "Yo, Inaki. Is this guy giving you trouble?" Mordred waved them off. "Nah, he's cool." "You sure, Inaki?" he asked again, still glaring at Issei. The blonde girl, who couldn't be any taller than 5'2", sent a menacing glare at him. "I said he's with me, got it?" she snapped. The poor man nearly wet himself as he nodded. "If I find any of you messing with him, you deal with me, Cappies." "Yes, Inaki?" The blonde girl nodded. "All right, make yourself scarce," she ordered. "I don't want any of you bothering me. If I need you, I'll come get you. Now scram." Issei watched numbly as the biker gang drove off, the sounds of their motorcycles disappearing in the distance. "Mordred," the blonde-haired girl threw him a grin. "That gang confronted me right after I left the Tokyo airport," Mordred explained as she began walking away, beckoning him to follow her. "They thought I was a helpless little foreign girl and tried to intimidate me into coming with them." As the girl spoke, she led him around the corner where a sleek, red and black motorcycle sat waiting. The nearby pedestrians seemed to avoid walking near the bike and began walking faster as they spotted Mordred. "Of course, I wasn't going to have any of that," the blonde continued. "So, I beat the shit out of them. You should have been there. It was glorious." She slipped her red jacket on and donned a pair of dark sunglasses. "They were so moved by my sheer superiority that they dubbed me their new leader." The Issei felt like face-palming, so he did. Mordred Pendragon, heir to the throne of Camelot and knight of the Round Table. Leader of the motorcycle gang. He heaved a world-weary sigh. "Why does this not surprise me?" The girl merely shrugged before swinging a leg over her mighty steed and revving the engine. "Hop on, master," she urged. "Just tell me where to go." He did so with another sigh. He was too tired to argue with her. He could only hope Tamama would take the news about you, Amma. "Well, be what?" "God damn it, I said." "I agreed to be her boyfriend," Issei said tiredly as he, Tamamo, Mordred and Ashiya sat around the kotatsu with their tea. Shakazaro sat on the kitchen counter, getting her kicks from their argument. "And just why would you do that?" the fox girl demanded, crossing her arms. Issei tried to ignore the way her breasts heaved. He failed, much to her delight. She remained peeved at him, however. Margaret glanced down at her own cup and scowled, which she promptly hid by taking a sip of her tea. Rubbing his temples, Issei replied wearily. "I told you all about this new organization called the Cows Brigade, right?" At their nods, he continued, "Well, their actions so far have not been in favor of maintaining peace between the factions. According to Azazel, members of the Grigori have begun behaving strangely. Sacred gear users are vanishing, and he fears there may be a traitor among his organization that is responsible. And you intend to use this fallen angel girl to try and glean information on who this traitor is, as you deducted." Issei nodded. "It's very likely that the lower-ranking fallen are simply pawns being used by a higher power," he explained. "If I can get a name, Azazel can handle the rest." Mutamama whined. "Fine. But you have to take me out on date after you're done. I believe I'm entitled to it, considering that I've been unfailingly loyal. Not to mention utterly adorable." "I'll see what I can do," Essie sighed. An evil glint entered in the fox girl's eyes. "But if you don't, terrible things shall await you," she whispered ominously. "Though, I suppose it would be rather inconvenient for you to fall down a flight of stairs and break both your legs, so that's out. Who waking up in the morning as a potato bug would be fitting, but that's way too gross, so that's out too." Issei could feel a cold chill riding up his spine as she spoke. But nothing screams divine punishment quite like dysentery caused by eating moldy bread. "That would be a good plan," Ashiya nodded, "if we could afford bread." Immediately, Tamama went from vengeful to depressed as Ashiya reminded her of their financial status. "Moo," she cried, wiping her eyes and turning to the blonde knight sitting across from her. "Would it have to be you that showed up? Why couldn't it have been Suzuki?" Margaret gave her a harsh glare. You got a problem with me? She growled. The ho-ho, if it weren't for you, I could be living in the lap of luxury, little girl. Bounce. If possible, Mordred's glare intensified. You! Issei sighed. Asha. The white-haired man nodded before walking over and smacking their heads against each other. Ow, the two girls cried, looking up at him with tears in their eyes. Enough bickering, he snapped. You're troubling, Issei-sama. Before I forget, Mordred, Issei stood and walked over to one of the kitchen drawers. He withdrew the appropriate identification papers and handed them to the blonde girl. You'll be attending Qua Academy with us tomorrow. I've already arranged a uniform in your size. The knight frowned as she looked over her new ID. Molly Knight. She sneered, less Mashiach Issei? And Tomomo replied in unison. Boy. Wait a minute. Mordred's eyes widened as she glanced at Tomomo, who was still clad in her uniform. You mean I have to wear that? Is something wrong? It's so perverted. The others looked at her as though she were insane. Mordred, Issei said irritably. You're wearing even less than that right now, but look at it. Ah, the little girl is afraid of skirts, Tomomo giggled. She did a little twirl, giving a tantalizing look at her panties. They were black, with lace. It's fine, we can probably get you a boy's uniform. The blonde girl nodded in satisfaction. Good, besides, the fox girl cooed. I'd rather have Master's attention all to Miss Aleph, Mordred froze. Master loves this uniform, right? Don't you think Tomomo looks so adorable? Essie coughed nervously as the fox girl sauntered over to him, her hips swaying in a hypnotic manner. Her ears suddenly propped up and a single tail burst out from her lower back. The tail emerged from beneath her skirt, causing it to hike up dangerously. The appendage wrapped itself around his wrist, preventing escape. You're it? Tomomo hummed as she slowly wrapped her arms around Issei's neck. Did you say something, little girl? I'll wear it. Oh, Master. I said I'll wear it. I'll wear it. The blonde girl finally shouted, her face turning red. Whether from anger or embarrassment, Issei was unsure. Get off of him. I don't think I will. Tomomo giggled before tilting her head up and kissing him deeply. Behind her, Margaret began shaking as she slowly lowered her head until her bangs shadowed her eyes. Master, she began, as something began taking shape in her right hand. Which would you prefer? A fox fur coat or a hat? With a shriek of rage, the blonde tightened her grip on the fully formed sword and leaped at the fox girl. Tomomo immediately summoned the magic circle in retaliation. In her corner, Chakazaro watched the escalating fight and laughed with psychotic glee. Holy shit, I had a lot of fun riding this one, it practically rode itself. And so another of his aide's servants appears. Molly Knight, Margaret Pendragon, Fate Apocrypha, the son of the King Arthur, or should I say Arturia. Mordred was conceived between Arturia and her sister Morgan Le Fay through unorthodox means. Morgan had blackmailed Merlin into turning Arturia into a pseudo-male. Morgan then used magic to extract sperm from the now male Arturia and created a homunculus clone of Arturia. She named the child Mordred. Due to her nature as a homunculus, Mordred grew much faster than other children but also possessed a shorter lifespan. Told that the throne was rightfully hers, Morgan bid Mordred to take her the king's place, and though Margaret shared that desire, before that came her adoration to the king. Ashamed of her twisted birth, Margaret envied normal people and worshipped the perfect king. Given a helmet she was told to never remove, she ventured to Camelot and joined the Knights of the Round Table. She protected the way of the knight, all the while continuing to hide her dislike of others. However, even that came to an end when her mother, Morgan, finally revealed the truth of her dark birth. While shocked, she was overjoyed. While not a proper human being, she shared the same blood as her beloved king. She felt that in name, mind and body, she was fit to be the true successor of the king. And so she went, without the slightest feelings of rebellion, spurred on by the truth, and approached the king with delight. The king rejected her. She was told that she could not be his son, and could not be the heir to the throne. Her love and childish worship of the king died then. Believing that the king rejected her because of her inhuman nature, she left Camelot only to return as the leader of its conquerors. The two met on the field of battle. King and knight. Father and son, mother and daughter, the two faced each other on a hill of swords. Margaret pointed out that Camelot was gone and that the victor no longer mattered because there was nothing left. Blaming the king, Margaret asked if the king hated the son of Mordred that much. Arturia motionlessly replied, "Not once did I despise you. There was only one reason I would not give you the throne. You did not have the capacity of a king." The two charged forward to meet each other. Mordred was bested by her father. Freed of the mask forced upon her, with a face identical to her father, she spoke her final words, "Father," all the while reaching out to touch the king at least once, but was not even granted that wish as she fell. Being bound by a powerful curse, Mordred still swung her sword even as her strength left her and mortally wounded Arturia. As the king staggered away, Mordred was left, dying upon a hell of swords. As she cried out her anguish, she heard a voice. To the stricken girl, it was the most beautiful voice she had ever heard. The voice asked her if she was happy with the way she had lived her life. Of course she wasn't. Her entire life had been a lie. Always alone. Manipulated by those around her. Envying those around her. Always alone, the voice spoke again. It offered her a second chance. A new life. It promised to care for her, as though she were his own. It offered her love and warmth, the chance to live her life the way she saw fit. To not be manipulated and not be judged for what she is. But it also warned her that while he would never judge her, others would. She may come to regret her decision should she agree. She would be binding herself to servitude, to an unknown entity. But as the last of her strength left her and her body grew cold, she whispered the one word that would forever change her fate. Yes. And for the first time in her bitterly cold life she felt warmth. Chapter 5. "Hello," Margaret said with a stiff bow. "The name's Molly Knight. I'm from England. I would say, please take care of me, but I don't give a damn about any of you. Just stay out of my way and we'll get along fine." Issei sat at his desk, smiling tiredly as the murmurs began. "Hey, she's pretty cute. What an attitude though. Are all foreigners like that?" "No way, Ria's one-sama is nowhere near like that." The teacher instructed the blonde girl to sit near the front of the class and was duly ignored. She swaggered over to the desk beside Issei and plopped down. Her eyes begged him to refute her. The teacher looked ready to do just that, but froze as his eyes suddenly glazed over. Issei glanced at Tamamo sitting behind him and saw the fox girl muttering under her breath. She was subtly pointing her index finger at the now hypnotized instructor. Margaret growled in irritation before crossing her arms and gazing out the window. The blonde knight had been tense ever since she'd donned her new uniform this morning. She'd probably been eager for a fight even if it was only with a normal human. He sent a silent thanks to Tamamo. It seemed she had calmed down from yesterday. At least, she was calm enough to understand that Margaret picking a fight with the teacher would be a bad thing. After breaking up last night's catfight, he received a call from Yuma, the fallen angel girl. They spoke for a while before she proposed that she walk him to school tomorrow. He'd agreed and told his servants as much. The rest of the evening was spent in an uncomfortable silence since Tamama refused to speak to him. Later that same evening he'd walked outside to see the fox girl practicing random karate katas in the front yard. First, strike the crotch. Next, really strike the crotch. Repentance through crotch violence. Needless to say, he wasted no time retreating inside and barricading himself in the bathroom. Issei was broken out of his musing by the teacher asking Margaret a question, to which the blonde answered with a smart-ass reply. He sighed as he heard Tamama muttering behind him. It was going to be a long day. Perhaps it hadn't been too bad, Issei mused. It seemed Riaz had gotten Sona to agree in getting Aisha hired. An hour or so after the start of classes, the white-haired man had walked in, claiming to be their new math teacher for the rest of the year. Thankfully, he'd ignored them for the majority of class, giving Margaret enough time to cool off and relax. It was after school now and the three students were on their way to the Occult Research Club room to introduce Margaret to their newfound allies. Ashiya was currently at a staff meeting in order to get to know his new co-workers, but he would be joining them later. "We're here," Issei called out as they stepped inside. The other club members were already there. They seemed to have been waiting for him. Issei-kun, Rias greeted him. Just the person I wished to speak to. She glanced at the blonde girl beside him. I see you've brought someone else with you. I presume she is another of your servants. Yes, Issei nodded. This is Molly Knight. She hails from England. She is my knight. He finished sheepishly. The crimson-haired beauty arched a single, delicate eyebrow. Molly Knight, the knight, she questioned. Her eyes sparkled with amusement. I assume that is not her true name. Indeed it's not, Princess, Mordred said dryly. Believe me, I'd change it, but there'd be way too much bullshit involved. Rias raised another eyebrow at her choice of words. While the others looked shocked that such a tiny, delicate-looking girl would speak in such a way. Looks truly could be deceiving. I see, the redhead nodded. And may I ask what your true name is? Her peerage leaned in, eager to know the girl's true identity. After learning of Tamamo, they'd assumed that most of Issei's servants would be well-known figures. They were correct in that respect, however. Then just why should I tell you? Issei sighed as Rias looked startled. Well, I'm Mordred-chan, be polite, Tamamo chided. She smiled innocently as the blonde sent her an annoyed glare. We're guests here, after all. Ria's eyes widened in shock. Mora can't, why you don't mean? The blonde drew herself to her full, unimpressive height. Yes, I am Margaret Pendragon, son of King Arthur and Knight of the Round Table. Even though she had to look down to meet the blonde's eyes, Ria still felt tiny in the presence of the legendary knight. Unbelievable, the redhead muttered as she stared at Issei intently. Tamamo no Mei, the nine-tailed fox, and Mordred Pendragon, the knight of treachery. Who's next? Achilles, Heracles. Issei chuckled sheepishly. No one that grand, I assure you. He held his hands up in surrender as both his servants suddenly scowled at him. No offense, girls. Aquino began, a confused smile on her face. I was under the impression that Margaret was male. The legends got more than my gender incorrect, the blonde girl grunted. Oh? Kiba asked curiously. What do you mean? Issei smiled. Let's just say that Uther never had any sons. It took several moments for those words to sink in. Rias was the first to realize what he meant. Why, you mean that Arthur Pendragon, the once and future king, was actually Arturia Pendragon? He nodded. She was forced to hide her true gender because having a woman on the throne would have been unacceptable during her time. I see, Ria said, regaining her composure. Moving on, Issei-kun, there's something I'd like to speak with you about. Oh? Yes, she continued. Kaneko has told me that you were walking to school with a fallen angel this morning. I'm curious about why. Issei sighed before gazing at her seriously. Alright, senpai, I'm entrusting you with quite a bit of information. I trust you'll keep what I'm about to tell you to yourself. At her hesitant nod, he continued. Azazel, the Governor-General, is losing control over his subordinates. Excuse me? Was her shocked reply. You heard me, Issei nodded. There is a new organization that has emerged sometime within the last few years. They've taken to calling themselves the Chaos Brigade. Their leader is currently unknown, but they've still made quite a following. The good governor believes that one of his Grigori have sided with them, Tamamo continued. Groups of fallen angels have been going rogue. Azazel has asked us to help determine who this traitor is. You're working with the fallen angels? Rias asked, eyes narrowing. Tell me, princess. Mordred interjected, her green eyes glinting fiercely. Do you want to go to war? What? Of course not. Because that's exactly what's going to happen if Azazel gets usurped. The blonde knight growled. Well, perhaps not exactly, Issei admitted. But the possibility is too high for us to ignore. I see, the crimson-haired girl seemed to deflate under their intense gazes. And what do you intend to do with this girl? Well, my hope is to earn her trust and have her slip information, knowingly or otherwise, he explained. But I'm already suspicious of her actions. You know that they've been watching my workplace, correct? Of course. Azazel explained that the rogue angels have been kidnapping sacred gear users. That certainly can't be good, Aquino muttered. Margaret snorted. Do you think? Indeed, Tamamo nodded. And at worst, they've turned up dead. This was the first time many of them had ever seen her look so serious. And knowing this, we can deduce that someone working at McDonough's possesses a sacred gear. When I first noticed that they were watching, I had one of my servants cast a tracking spell on my co-workers, Issei explained. He paused for a moment. As a matter of fact, here he is now. As he said this, the door opened and a white-haired man stepped in. Pardon the intrusion, Oshiya said with a polite bow. Issei stood. Everyone, this is Oshiya Shiru, my right hand, he said with a smile. He's been with me since the beginning and is my most loyal and powerful servant. His most powerful. So this is his Kyuyen then? Rias thought as she stood to meet him. Ashiya-sensei, the crimson-haired girl said as she and her peerage bowed to him in respect. I hope you found the school to your liking. Yes, the campus is beautiful, Ashiya nodded. I believe you were discussing the fallen, Issei-sama. Yes, as I was saying, Issei continued. I had Ashiya cast a tracking charm on my co-workers. Then, when Tamamo arrived, I asked her to weave her own enchantments that would allow us to know if, when and where they encounter a fallen angel. So far, our master is the only person that they have approached, Tamamo reported. And when I parted ways with you, Miss, and this morning, I sent Shakazaro to tail her, Issei added. The silence that followed was suffocating. Issei-sama? Issei-sama, Ashiya questioned nervously. Was that such a good idea? I almost feel sorry for those people, Margaret muttered as she kicked her legs up on the table. Almost. May their God have mercy on them, for she shall not, Tamamo murmured before flinching from the prayer. Come on, guys, Essie complained. You can't honestly. He quieted as they simply stared at him with looks of pity. Oh God. I condemned them to death, didn't I? Just what are you all talking about? Riaz demanded. Tachizero, she's my familiar, he explained, his voice tired. She's a little bloodthirsty. His servants all snorted. A little? Issei just sighed once again. I'd better call her back. Issei stood and placed one hand on top of the other, palms facing downward. On the tabletop, a complex magic circle appeared in a shower of blue light. Thankfully, the room was charmed to conceal all supernatural activity from the outside world. Bria's brow furrowed in thought as she stared at Issei's circle. She'd never seen that crest before. It seemed to depict a ram's skull. She was broken out of her musing as something small began to take shape. Finally, the circle's light died down. The image they saw would forever be burned in their memories. The green-haired doll resembling a marionette appeared before them. In her right hand was a meat cleaver the size of Kaneko's head, and in her left hand was a dagger bigger than her torso. Her entire body was covered in blood and was pointedly dripping all over the table. It was obviously not hers, but the most disturbing image were her eyes, for they lacked all emotion save sheer psychotic glee. Her tiny mouth was stretched into a shit-eating grin as she stared them all down. Ah, fun time is over already? The puppet asked in disappointment. Whatever. I was done anyway. She took both knives and stabbed them into the table with a disturbing clunk. Zero Issei sighed tiredly. Why? Why not? She shrugged in reply. Don't worry, your angel girlfriend is still alive. Can't say the same for all those exorcists under the church, though. Must have been 20 of them, at least. Well, I suppose it could have been worse, as she acknowledged. Riaz and her peerage looked at him as though he were insane. Issei rubbed the bridge of his nose. Did anyone see you? He questioned. If they did, I guarantee they're not alive, the puppet answered as if she had cast a cleaning spell on her. She didn't bother to acknowledge him. I followed Angel Girl into the church and saw her meet with 3 other angels and a weird exorcist. The angels took off while the exorcist went down a hidden staircase underneath the altar. And this is where you killed all the exorcists? Margaret questioned. Apparently, Rias and the others were still trying to get over the fact that they were conversing with a psychotic, mass-murdering, killer puppet. Yep, she nodded. The weird exorcist that was talking to the angels was checking out some kind of sacrificial altar. He kept mumbling about a nun from Europe while giggling to himself. He was my kinder guy, really, so I let him leave before I killed all his friends. The puppet looked up at Riaz, who was still gaping at her in shock. Is she okay? Issei snapped his fingers in the girl's face, startling her. Oh, hello, I'm Ria's Gremory, nice to meet you. Oh, I know all about you, Shikizero said offhandedly. I've followed you home a few times, to make sure you weren't a threat. Ria's went pale and swallowed nervously. Issei couldn't blame her. Knowing that you've been stalked by a serial killer was nerve-wracking to say the least. Well, he said, trying to break the tension, I think that we've had enough excitement for one day. He stood along with the rest of his servants and bowed politely. Please don't be nervous about Shikizero. I guarantee your safety from her. He glared at the puppet as she jumped onto his shoulder. Right. She rolled her eyes and huffed. Yeah, Issei sighed but nodded. We'll see you tomorrow, Ria-senpai. Goodbye, Issei-kun, Ria stammered as Ashia summoned a transportation circle and a group of 5 teleported home. Thanks for listening to my video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and comment below your favorite part. Sayonara, see you in the next video.